in to Local News Live, a production of AOC Community Media. It's Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. We do this in partnership with the Acadiana Advocate, stories from their journalists read by our volunteer news readers. You can hear Local News Live Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on AOC 1, the AOC Community Media channel on YouTube, and on Cypress Street Radio at aocinc.org/csradio. You can find the print versions of these stories and more at theadvocate.com. We couldn't bring you this community service without the generosity of our volunteer readers. Today, we are joined by Bruce Cohen. Bruce, welcome to Local News Live.
Well, thank you, my man. I'm pleased to be here. Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thanks so much for reading. I'm going to go listen on Cypress Street.
All right, Matt. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, Acadiana. Welcome to January 19th, 2021. We are a day away from the inauguration of our incoming and new President-elect Biden and Kamala Harris. So this is a very, very important week in the history of our country. But we're going to launch into some Acadiana news. First, as we usually do, project launched to examine policing in Louisiana. Documentary focuses on treatment of people of color. Story by Megan Wyatt, staff writer. Black activists in Acadiana announced a new project Monday that will explore the failures of policing in Louisiana toward people of color. Andre Arsenault and Jamal Taylor released a trailer for the documentary project, which they're calling Louisiana, the Last Plantation, and launched an online fundraiser on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We did this so that we can honor one memory of the movement and engage in a very powerful way in shaping the narrative going forward, Taylor said in a phone interview. We are in the midst of the hardest work of the documentary right now, and that's trying to make sure that the narrative that we paint is the one that exists in Louisiana. The teaser trailer features modern-day footage of a plantation home intertwined with historical footage of the KKK or the Ku Klux Klan and lynchings of Black people. The trailer soundtrack features sounds from modern-day protests, including a passionate speech and collective chants over an historical African-American spiritual. We believe that this documentary will make a difference, Arsenault said in the trailer. Documentary will use unreleased photos and police body cam footage, interviews with victims and their families, and insight from attorneys handling brutality cases to show how the plantation mentality is alive and well in the state. As the Black sons of Black mothers, we believe in the power of uplifting our own community and funding our own projects for us and by us, Taylor said. That means that we control the narrative and tell the whole truth. Arsenault and Taylor have become familiar voices in the social justice movement in Acadiana. Both the co-founders of Stand Black and are also involved in the Village and the Lafayette branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. They've spoken out against police brutality, organized protests, and stood beside the families of Trayford Pellerin, the 31-year-old Black man who was shot to death by Lafayette police last summer, and Kawan Bobby Charles, a Black 15-year-old whose death gained attention in November after his family shared a graphic image of his face. Ron Haley, the civil rights attorney representing both families, is also featured in the trailer. In Louisiana, there is a problem, Haley said. The police disproportionately murder and brutalize people of color. I can't tell you how many hospitals I have visited. I can't tell you how many funerals I have attended. I cannot tell you how many mothers' hands I've held. Policing in Louisiana is broken, and I intend to fix it. Arsenault and Taylor's latest endeavor will happen under a new production company they created called We Ain't Twins. They intend to fund, shoot, and edit the documentary by the end of the year and enter the finished product in film festivals. They hope this will be the first in a series of documentary projects that explore race relationships or relations in Louisiana. We want to tell stories that awaken the mindset of people, Taylor said. When we think about the civil rights movement, one of the most powerful things that motivated change was the ability for people to see the outrageous abuse of people simply because they looked a certain way. And I think that these projects will help to raise the narrative again in that way. Moving on to the Crime Blotter, which is put together by the Advocate staff and KATC TV reports. 2 teens killed in Sunday New Iberia shooting. 2 teenagers are dead after a Sunday afternoon shooting in New Iberia, KATC reports. Police said the 16-year-old boys were arguing in the 700 block of Rosalie Street when they shot each other. The victims, who have not been identified because of their age, were pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation into the incident is ongoing. The Youngsville Police Department will be closed until January 25th due to a COVID-19 outbreak. Police will continue to patrol during the closure of the administrative office, according to a post on the department's Facebook page. In addition to the office closure, the Youngsville Magistrates Court set for January 20th has been postponed to February 24th. A man wanted in connection with the fatal December shooting in Kaplan has been arrested, KATC reports. Gary Lee Sellers Jr. was arrested Sunday afternoon, Kaplan Police Chief Joshua Hardy said. No one was injured during the process, he said. Police have been looking for Sellers since a December 29th shooting, which took place in a McDonald's during a confrontation over a stolen vehicle. 2 others were arrested the day of the shooting and charged and booked with the charge of principal second-degree murder. Kaplan police eventually located Sellers with assistance from the U.S. Marshals Service and the Vermilion Parish Sheriff's Office. Turning to state news, McNeese to open in transition. Most classes online. Half of storm-damaged campus has been repaired by Ken Stickney, staff writer. Lake Charles, out of Lake Charles. Most of McNeese State University's 7,000 students will trek back to classes, if not classrooms, this week. The campus was scheduled to reopen to students Tuesday. About half the campus is repaired from the impacts of Hurricanes Laura on August 27th and Delta on October 9th, with many buildings expected to be reopened in the next several days. Burton Residence Hall has been reopened and students are moving in. Others will follow soon, and apartments will be repaired following that. McNeese spokesperson Candice Townsend said over the weekend. Many of the academic buildings, which comprise the McNeese core campus, are repaired, and labs will come on quickly. Some buildings are being cleaned following repairs and will be opened in the next few days, Townsend said. Part of the preparation for reopening buildings is making sure desks and workstations are spaced for social distancing to offset the pandemic. We sent out a message to students on Friday. Most classes will be delivered online, but we will have some face-to-face classes. More classes will be opening up at the end of the week and during the following week, she said. Faculty members are setting up labs, especially in the sciences, and technology crews are checking for connectivity and working phone lines in some as yet unopened buildings. Townsend said this week will focus on transition, with the library, computer labs, and coffee shop opening Tuesday. Students were encouraged to park at the on-campus garage because several parking lots, some large, will be closed because of continuing construction. In some cases, building materials have been kept in areas usually used for parking. Townsend said, with the exception of a few statements, McNeese hasn't lost many faculty members. Some faculty members will begin the semester teaching online for reasons related to the storm or to avoid COVID-19. We are following the recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control, the Federal Task Force, and the Governor's Office regarding COVID-19, Townsend said. We are allowing employees, faculties, and staff, particularly those in high-risk situations, to be flexible. All of our face-to-face classes have online components built in. We have faculty, staff, students who will have to be out because of COVID. We don't want students penalized if they stay out. Townsend said enrollment is trending toward what McNeese showed in spring of 2020. She said numbers aren't in, enrollment continues this week. and some students may want to enroll when compressed courses are offered later in the semester. All McNeese sports will be played in the spring, including a McNeese football schedule of 7 games, 3 in Cowboy Stadium. McNeese President Darrell Burkell, a Cowboy football player some 40 years ago, said the games will be played in daylight because the stadium lighting remains damaged. He said games will be admission-free as a way to bolster community spirit. Richard Rodin, Director of Plant Facilities, said he hopes most construction will be completed by May. Taking a public service announcement break, the Pieces of Hope virtual open mic on Wednesday, January 27th at 7 p.m. The Festival Awards host Pieces of Hope virtual open mic on Zoom. For 16 years, the festival has hosted the Grand Coteau-based event featuring writers, musicians, and storytellers. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the creative community will gather online, coming together as an act of hope. So come to share or just to listen and enjoy. The 2-hour open mic presents 20 writers and musicians, each performing for 5 minutes. Performers are from Lafayette and all over the country. So make yourself a drink, grab some cheese and crackers, sit back and enjoy some exquisite performances that will soothe, entertain, and enlighten. To join, just go to the Facebook page for Pieces of Hope Virtual Open Mic. The link to the Zoom Cafe will be available the week of the event. Or you can contact Martha Garner at fowmartha@gmail.com, or you can call 337-804-2482 for more information. This free community event is suitable for all ages and is sponsored by the Festival Awards Cultural Arts Collective. Okay, turning back to state news, Edwards commutes 36 prison sentences in 2020. Ex-inmates share stories of freedom challenges by Leah Skeen and Sam Carlin, staff writers for The Advocate. Duong Calvin Kyle has served 17 years in prison on an attempted murder conviction when he went before the Louisiana Pardon Board in 2015 and received a favorable recommendation for early release because officials considered him rehabilitated. The board decision left him one step away from freedom. All he needed was a signature from the governor. Kyle would wait another 5 years for that signature. During that time, he worked in the governor's mansion and at state police headquarters, both coveted jobs reserved for the most trusted inmates before a positive coronavirus diagnosis took him out of commission for over a month. He recovered and was ultimately released from prison in September, one of 36 people whose sentences Governor John Bel Edwards commuted last year, allowing them a chance of parole. All were convicted of violent crimes decades earlier and were deemed a low risk to public safety. Edwards, a Democratic governor who has championed criminal justice reform, granted more sentence commutations in 2020 than during his entire first term in office, whose when records show he awarded 34. Edwards took action quietly, granting the awards at a steady pace throughout the year. Some of the recipients, including Kawa, have received a favorable recommendation from the board under former Governor Bobby Jindal, who largely rejected the clemency process and granted just 3 commutations during his 8 years in office. Almost no one who applies for a commutation actually gets one, but they're the only possible relief mechanism for the thousands of people serving life and other decades-long sentences in Louisiana, which holds the highest incarceration rate in the country, in part due to the harsh sentencing laws and tough on crime policies that many other states have rejected in recent years. Edwards also granted 24 pardons in 2020. They usually apply to people who have finished serving their sentences, often for more minor crimes, and have requested that the offense be removed from their record. Pardons are typically more common and easier than to obtain than commutations. While grateful for his freedom and committed to building a productive life in society, Kyle was puzzled about the clemency process and the governor's recent decision, which ultimately shaved off about 2 years of his 30-year prison sentence. He wonders why now, Where's the logic? Kyle said he understands the political risk associated with granting clemency, but when month after month becomes year after year of waiting when the governor could release you to your family with just a stroke of a pen, when it chooses not to, you start to lose hope. Many clemency cases move more quickly, but Edwards has not explained his thought process or the factors he weighs most heavily. In response to a request for comment last week, his office said only that he takes this part of his job very seriously and considers each request separately, completely, and deeply. He will continue to give each decision the time and concern that it deserves. There are a dozen more applications still sitting on his desk. Those are inmates who receive favorable decisions from the Louisiana Board of Pardons and Parole, a panel of experts appointed by the governor who complete their own stringent review process of each case. Edwards won re-election in 2019 despite Republican groups blaming him or blasting him for supporting sentencing reform. He championed a package of reforms in 2017 which softened sentences for minor and nonviolent crimes, but stopped short of expanding parole for people convicted of serious violent offenses. The reforms were limited largely because of opposition from prosecutors and law enforcement leaders. Those groups often oppose clemency awards for similar reasons, because they believe in the importance of delivering definitive justice for victims and their families. Edwards has pledged to continue pushing for criminal justice reform through the coronavirus pandemic, largely derailed the 2020 legislative session. Prisoner rights advocates commended Edwards for increasing his use of clemency in 2020, though their calls for additional action became even more urgent amid the pandemic. Those demands were echoed across the nation as advocates asked governors to release medically vulnerable inmates and reduce state prison populations. Edwards hasn't revealed whether health concerns factored into his decision to award more commutations, and experts say most governors ended up doing little to address the imminent spread of COVID-19 through state prisons. Louisiana officials created a special new board last spring to consider a select group of inmates for early parole during the pandemic. But that program was short-lived and it had a negligible impact on the prison population. At least 32 state prisoners and 5 staff members have died from COVID-19 since the virus arrived in Louisiana last year, according to the Department of Corrections data. Overall, the response has been disappointing, said Kevin Ring, president of the national nonprofit FAM. But there is always a stigma associated with the clemency process, the potential for political ramifications. In general, we have zero tolerance for letting people out of prison early. That wasn't always the case, Ring noted. Clemency used to be much more common, both in Louisiana and nationwide, before a few controversial cases were met with heated political backlash and negative media coverage, according to experts. In Louisiana, former Governor Edwin Edwards signed 945 commutations during his first 2 terms, starting in 1972, then another 335 during his 3rd term. The numbers have varied widely under subsequent administrations. Kathleen Blanco signed 129 commutations in the early 2000s, followed by Jindal's 3. John Bell Edwards has now signed a total of 70 since he took office in 2016. When Kyle tested positive for coronavirus last spring, he was living at the state police barracks near Zachary, which provides minimum security housing for inmates with a record of good behavior. In response to his illness, officials sent him to quarantine at Angola's Camp J, an old solitary confinement wing once used for disciplinary purposes that was closed in 2018 amid safety concerns. Kyle spent time in Camp J over a decade ago as punishment for getting into fights. He said returning to those decrepit conditions felt like going back to square one. This time he was also battling a serious illness. When the State Department of Corrections started sending COVID-positive inmates to Camp J early on in the pandemic, a slew of prisoner rights groups criticized the move as inhumane. In a letter dated May 8th, dozens of advocates, attorneys and criminal justice experts implored Edwards to sign more commutations. Your signature is the only barrier to freedom for these mothers, fathers, siblings, sons, daughters, and friends. The letter also referenced Kyle by name, noting his COVID-19 diagnosis. He is currently being held at Camp J in Angola, a substandard medical facility that puts patients far from access to ventilators or quality medical care, advocates wrote. He contracted the virus in DOC custody, but he could have been granted commutation months ago. He needs your signature. Gayo received that signature 2 months later. By then, he had recovered from COVID-19 and returned to the barracks. Kyle was sentenced to 30 years for attempted first-degree murder at age 19 when he shot a bystander accidentally during an altercation, according to his account. State law required him to serve 85% of the sentence before becoming eligible for parole. Even after waiting 5 years for the governor's approval, Kyle said receiving this signature gave him a new rush of optimism. Finally, it happened, he said. God has blessed me, the feeling everyone wants in prison. When you open that big yellow envelope and see that gold seal. Kyle was released in September after the Parole Board gave final approval, and he enrolled in the Louisiana Parole Project, a Baton Rouge nonprofit that provides support services and housing to people being released from prison after decades behind bars. He has since moved back to his hometown of Houma, where he's staying with his sister. Being released from prison into the pandemic world of 2020 has been challenging, Kyle said, especially because of the job market. He's struggling to find a decent job with a felony record, despite the skills he acquired in prison, like carpentry, public speaking, and inventory and warehouse operations. In the meantime, he's working at his brother's convenience store. His relatives pooled their money and bought him a car. He's still getting used to his new iPhone. I'm behind the times. I'm in uncharted territory, he said. He thinks often about the friends he left behind in prison, many of whom are similarly awaiting a signature. He wants to help them from the outside, to be their voice and advocate on their behalf, but the enormity of the task can be paralyzing. Records show that there are more than 100 Louisiana inmates who have received favorable decisions from the pardon board under Edwards, but have not received his signature. Advocates argue that the commutation cases that make it past the pardon board have been thoroughly vetted by the expert panel, which collects all available data and records showing the inmates' accomplishments and disciplinary history in prison, solicits statements from the victims, and uses algorithms to calculate their likelihood of committing another crime once released. Kerry Myers, deputy director of the Louisiana Parole Project, cites research showing that people age out of crime, meaning their likelihood of getting rearrested decreases the older they get and the longer they spend behind bars. Punishment has diminishing returns when it ignores rehabilitation and risk. And the only remaining purpose is retribution, he said. That's where the clemency process comes in. Vaccine trial participant praises shots' effectiveness. Retired pharmacist, 66, never got symptoms, even when family got sick. Article by Emily Woodruff, staff writer for The Advocate. When Ricky Salvaggio signed up for the Moderna vaccine trial in July, he didn't think it was a big deal. A retired pharmacist, the 66-year-old, knew he was at risk for severe disease in his age group and thought his participation might help scientists figure out if the vaccine worked. The faster they get people signed up to find out if it works, it would benefit everybody, Salvaggio said in July. The first shot went in on August 12th, and he got the second one on September 8th. Salvaggio had a headache, a sore arm, and some feelings of malaise after the second shot, but he still didn't know if he was in the placebo group or if he got the vaccine. He and his wife continued to distance themselves from extended family, keeping their pod tight at just immediate family. But the week before Thanksgiving, his daughter and her husband, a pilot, got sick with what they thought was a cold. Salvaggio and his wife cared for their 15-month-old grandson while his parents recuperated. But when the baby started running a fever, But then the baby started running a fever. Watching the baby, I remember holding him. He was sneezing and coughing on me, said Salvaggio. His daughter and her husband got their COVID-19 test back positive for the coronavirus. We thought we were doing everything we could, said Salvaggio, who has two brothers with extended family that live nearby. We never get together as a large family, never got together for holidays or birthdays. Everyone in the family got sick, his daughter and her husband, his wife and his son, everyone except Salvaggio, whose test was negative. I never got one symptom, said Salvaggio. I didn't get a sniffle, and here I was around all of these sick people. Salvaggio now knows for sure what he strongly suspected in November. He was unblinded in the trial last week. He got the vaccine. He credits it with keeping him symptom-free, especially because he has several factors that put him at a higher risk: hypertension, prediabetes, and an older male. Based on everything that happened within my family, I think I would have had a COVID case. No one can predict how you would do. I kind of think about it, what would happen if I would have gotten it. Potentially, it can be life-saving. His family had respiratory symptoms, headaches, and lost their sense of taste and smell. His 33-year-old son-in-law's blood oxygen dipped to 92 at some point, according to an at-home pulse oximeter. If it falls to 90, medical professionals recommend seeking emergency care. The struggle is familiar to families grappling with social distancing while juggling work and child care. It's also familiar to doctors who say most COVID-19 patients they see in hospitals now aren't getting infected because they're going to large gatherings. It's pretty sad when we have grandparents who are ill in the ICU, and then the son and daughter is also coming in, said Dr. Catherine Baumgarten, an infectious disease specialist at Ochsner Health. We've had that scenario multiple times across our facilities. The rest of the family has recovered, though the effects linger. His daughter still can't smell or taste. His wife gets tired more easily and has lingering headaches. For Salvaggio's part, he's taken it upon himself to urge his contacts to get the shot when it's their turn. When it affects your own family, it hits home, he said. Why would choose to gamble with a virus instead of a vaccine that seems to work? He said. It's certainly safe, and you don't have to go out on a limb like I did. The Moderna trial is in the process of unblinding participants, offering the vaccine if they were in the placebo group. Pfizer has said it will unblind participants by March. Several sites in Louisiana participated in the clinical trials. Trial participants will continue to be monitored with blood draws to check antibody levels in order to gauge how long the vaccine's protection lasts. All right, we're right about at midway during our broadcast this morning. So we usually turn to the day in history and the zodiac, or the horoscope, as I like to refer to it as. So today in history, today is Tuesday, January 19th. It's the 19th day of 2021, and there are potentially 346 shopping days left in the year. Today's highlight in history: on January 19th, 1981, the United States and Iran signed an accord paving the way for the release of 52 Americans held hostage for more than 14 months. Also in this date, in 1861, Georgia became the fifth state to secede from the Union. 1915, Germany carried out its first air raid on Britain during World War I as a pair of Zeppelins shot bombs onto Great Yarmouth and King's Lynn in England. 1937, millionaire Howard Hughes set a transcontinental air record by flying his monoplane from Los Angeles to Newark, New Jersey in 7 hours, 28 minutes, and 25 seconds. In 1942, during World War II, Japanese forces captured the British Protectorate of North Borneo. Also on this date, a German submarine sank the Canadian liner RMS Lady Hawkins off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, killing 250 people and 71 survived. In 1944, the federal government relinquished control of the nation's railroads for their owners following a settlement of a wage dispute. 1955, on this date, a presidential news conference was filmed for televisions and newsreels for the first time. with the permission of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. 1987, Guy Hunt became Alabama's first Republican governor since 1874, as he was sworn into office succeeding George C. Wallace. 2005, the American Cancer Society reported that cancer had passed heart disease as the top killer of Americans aged 85 and younger. In 2006, Osama bin Laden, in an audio tape that was his first in more than a year, said that Al-Qaeda was preparing for attacks in the United States. At the same time, he offered a long-term truce without specifying the conditions. 10 years ago, Chinese President Hu Jintao, visiting the White House, declared a lot still needs to be done to improve his country's record on human rights. The exchange with President Barack Obama over human rights was balanced by U.S. delight over newly announced Chinese business deals expected to generate about $45 billion in new export sales for the U.S. 5 years ago today, Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump received the endorsement of conservative firebrand Sarah Palin, giving the businessman a potential boost less than 2 weeks before Iowa's kickoff caucuses. 1 year ago, health officials in central China reported that 17 more people had been diagnosed with the new coronavirus, which had then killed 2 patients and placed other countries on alert. Looking at today's birthdays, actor Tippi Hedren, who was famous for doing some Hitchcock movies, is 91. Movie director Richard Lester, he directed the Beatles' Hard Day's Night, is 89 today. Actor-singer Michael Crawford is 79. Actor Shelley Fabre is 77. Country singer Dolly Parton, 75 years old today. TV chef Paula Deen, 74. Rock singer Martha Davis, Martha and the Vandellas, is 70. Singer Dewey Bunnell of America, the group America, is 69. Actor Desi Arnaz Jr. is 68. Actor Katie Seagal, 67. Comedian Paul Rodriguez, 66. Conductor Sir Simon Rattle is 66 years old today. Basketball coach and commentator Jeff Van Gundy is 59. International Tennis Hall of Famer Stefan Edberg is 55. Actor Sean Wayans, 50. Comedian impressionist Frank Caliendo is 47. And movie director Damien Chazelle is 36. Now we turn to the zodiac. If you're a Capricorn, difficulty with a friend, relative, or co-worker will surface if you let your emotions take control. Refuse to get dragged into someone's dilemma. Concentrate on fitness and self-improvement. Aquarius, share your intentions and you will be resolved pending issues. Holding in your feelings will cause stress and anxiety that will affect your health and emotional well-being. Be honest. Pisces, say what's on your mind, be direct, and the response you receive will be honest and reliable. The more you are yourself, the people around you, and how you think, the better. Aries, if you care, share. Helping a cause or someone in need will make you feel good. Keep emotional issues and personal matters to yourself. Don't take an unnecessary risk. Taurus, put your time and your energy to proper use. Take care of the unfinished business before you start something new. Look for unique ways to use your skills and knowledge. Gemini, don't let confusion take charge and ruin your day. Do your best to take care of responsibilities, regardless of what's going on around you. A job well done will lead to financial gain. Cancer, someone who has something unique to offer will appeal to you. Handle partnerships carefully. Don't let your emotions lead to bad assumptions, and be a good listener. Leos, you'll have plenty to mull over. Get organized and gather information that will help you make better decisions. A problem with a coworker will develop if you cannot agree on strategy. Virgo, my birth sign, explore the possibilities, but don't make a move prematurely. An offer you receive will interest you, but consider the cost before you get involved. Make a romantic gesture with confidence. Well, I always do. Libra, be responsible when dealing with personal matters. Don't jump to conclusions or make a fuss without having all the facts. Spend time sorting through clutter and taking stock. And Scorpio, catch up with an old friend or relative via phone or email. Rethink your situation and what you are up against. Find innovative ways to ease stress. And finally, Sagittarius, make a change to how you earn your living or handle your finances. Sticking to a budget and lowering your overhead will ease tension at home and make your life better. Avoid excessive people. And the horoscope, as we know, is an entertainment feature not based on scientific fact. Okay, and usually what I've been doing since last week or the first of the year is Rolling Stone put out a list of 80 musicians who passed away in 2020. So I will continue to the list. Today we're on number 26, and that person is Pierre Kesdy. Pierre Kesdy was the bassist for the celebrated Chicago punk Naked Raygun. He died at the age of 58. The 80s outfit was a favorite of Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, Steve Albini, Fall Out Boy, and more. Okay. Next up, Johnny Nash. Johnny Nash, I can see clearly now, singer, died at 80 during the year 2020. He was a 1972 reggae-tinged hit, propelled the singer to fame. Next up, Mac Davis. Mac Davis was a country singer and Elvis Presley songwriter, died at the age of 78. The singer-songwriter wrote Elvis Presley's Indelible in the Ghetto, alongside solo hits like Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me and Stop and Smell Roses. Also, Georgia Dobbins Davis. Georgia Dobbins Davis was an unsung Motown hero who co-wrote Please Mr. Postman, and she died at the age of 78. She helped find the Marvelettes, but her father forced her to leave her musical dreams behind her before the girl group scored Motown's first #1. And finally, King Von, rising rapper King Von, died after 26. After a shooting in Atlanta, Chicago MC was primed for a breakout following streaming hits like Crazy Story and a trio of successful mixtapes. Okay, going back into the news and staying within the entertainment world of news, but also in the state news. Zydeco star running for Lake Charles mayor seeks to reimagine city by Dominic Cross, contributing writer to The Advocate. A two-time Grammy-nominated Zydeco musician is running for mayor of the fifth largest city in Louisiana. Sean Ardoin, 51, said that after two devastating hurricanes and the ongoing pandemic, he saw his home city of Lake Charles in a different light. The pandemic is one thing. We've got to recover from two hurricanes, and we've got to figure out how to survive and thrive in the middle of the pandemic, Ardoin said. But the issues we had before these things haven't gone anywhere. The issues that we have with the pandemic and hurricanes, we've got to work on that. That's the new thing, he said. It's exposed the fact that we don't have the tax base. Ardoin will run as a Democrat against a Republican incumbent, Mayor Nick Hunter, who took office in 2017. The election is March 20th. With the campaign theme Rebuild and Reimagine, Ardoin hopes to reverse what he considers an exodus of the city's workforce, infrastructure problems, and housing issues. The hurricane or hurricanes have exposed the gaps in housing opportunity, said Ardoin. The hurricanes have exposed we're losing our talent. Our talent keeps going to other places. The huge refinery industry presence and the casinos helped Lake Charles weather the recession, he said. So while we experienced it, it didn't hit us like it hit everybody else. Lake Charles has been prosperous for the last 10 to 15 years because of industry, said Ardoin. And we should have been taking that and promoting it to the rest of the country to get businesses to come here. Lost in the shuffle, he said, are small businesses. I want to create an arm of economic development aimed specifically at small businesses because as of right now, the city of Lake Charles, I lost my place. Give me a second. I lost my place here by hitting the wrong button. Okay, I want to create an arm of economic development aimed specifically at small businesses because of right now, the city of Lake Charles doesn't have that, said Ardoin. We needed to make it easier to start and continue doing businesses in Lake Charles. Ardoin says small businesses, the service sector in particular, can complement the larger industries and, in turn, keep locals from leaving town to spend their time and entertainment dollars in Lafayette, New Orleans, or Houston. There's no reason why the late 20-somethings to early 40-somethings have got to go 2 or 3 hours away to enjoy themselves because we don't have it here for whatever reason, said Ardoin. I'm not here to point the finger and play the playing game. I'm here to say, let's ask the questions to why this is and then get to work fixing it. Ardoin said he based his opinion on what he's seen as a touring musician, been all over the country. When I'm in a city that has the attractions and the industry that we have, I generally see license plates from all over, he said. If you've got a casino, people come from all over, so you should see license plates in the city, Ardoin continued. We don't really see that. We've got an international port, so it seems like we're in an international city living like a regional city, he said. We had one of the top ports in the world. Ardoin said that based on cargo tonnage, the port of Lake Charles is ranked as the 11th deepwater port in the United States and the 83rd busiest port in the world, and that the Global Trade magazine ranks the port at number 12 in the top 50. If we had an eye on small businesses, he said, then we would know the complementary industries that we need to work on to be able to service these big industries. While Hurricanes Laura and Delta rocked Lake Charles in 2020, Ardoin looks at that as more of an opportunity. There's money out there to help us, and there's a sentiment out there to help us as well, he said. We need somebody who's going to be able to take that and flip that into actual, tangible assistance. The last hurricane in 2015, the mayor of Lake Charles used that to beautify downtown. He found funds, Ardoin said, so I'm sure there's some funds out there where we can go and find because we have the political capital right now to do it. Ardoin said the pandemic kept him off the road and gave him time to look at his hometown and the issues it faces. My platform is that I want to promote the city. We've got to rebuild and reimagine, he said. We can't build it back the way it was, right? We should be a destination, not a drive-through. We need to retain our talent, stop bleeding our talent. We need to retain our tax dollars. We need to keep that money here. We need to keep our talent here. The time is now, said Ardoin. We can't wait. Next story up, police suspect posed as tipster, store clerk killed at Kenner gas station by Michelle Hunter, staff writer to The Advocate. As police worked furiously to identify the two men who killed a Kenner gas station clerk during a November 30th armed robbery, detectives received an anonymous call from a tipster who said he had information about the gunman. The caller identified the shooter as Lamonte Loggins and told police where Loggins was hiding out in Memphis, Tennessee. Loggins was indeed already a suspect in the case, according to authorities, but it wasn't until he was confronted directly by a detective that the caller revealed his own identity. Eric Rogers, Loggins' brother and his suspected accomplice in the deadly robbery. I informed him to turn himself in, Kenner Police Detective Aaron Savoie said this week as he testified during a probable case hearing held for Eric Rogers in Jefferson Parish Magistrate Court. Rogers, who tip led to his brother's December 8th arrest in Memphis, was taken into custody in the same city a day later. The 29-year-old waxed extradition and is back in Jefferson Parish, where he was booked with second-degree murder and armed robbery. Loggins, 28, was still being held Friday at the Shelby County Jail in Memphis on a $2 million bail as he awaited extradition proceedings, according to court records. Loggins faces charges including first-degree murder, armed robbery, illegally carrying of a weapon, and illegal use of a weapon, Kenner police said. Savoy's testimony on Thursday recounted the shocking killing of store clerk Abd El Ghada Salah, 30, who was gunned down as he knelt with his hands up inside a Shell service station at 3501 Williams Boulevard, authorities have said. But the detective also revealed a few more new details about the case. The DNA evidence police used to identify Loggins as the suspect came from a latex glove he allegedly dropped during the holdup, Savoy told the court. The glove can be seen on business surveillance video falling from one of the robber's pockets when he pulled out his gun, the detective said. Surveillance video figured heavily in the investigation. The entire crime was captured on the store's camera. The robber's escape was also recorded by a series of home surveillance camera systems that allowed detectives to track the suspect's getaway vehicle to a lorry driver apartment about 2.5 miles from the gas station. Rogers was the first of the robbers to enter the store, clad in a blue jacket with the hood pulled over his head and a face mask, Savoy said. Moments later, Loggins entered wearing a white beanie-style hat and a face mask. Loggins pulled out a gun and demanded money from Scylla, according to the detective. As the cashier is kneeling on the ground, Eric Rogers goes around the corner and gets 2 packs of Newport 100s and walks back around, Savoy attested. Rogers then walked toward the door and exited the store. Loggins made his way behind the front counter and pistol-whipped Celia, according to Savoy. Loggins was about to walk away, but he turned and fired one shot that hit Celia in the right side of his torso and exited out his back, Savoy said. The pair ran to their getaway vehicle, a gray Hyundai Sonata that belonged to Rogers' girlfriend, authorities said. Though fatally wounded, Sala managed to dial 911 and report the holdup, Savoy said. Rogers told investigators he had no idea his brother planned to rob the store, but admitted to stealing the cigarettes, Savoy said. Detectives, however, believe Rogers was in on the scheme based on witness interviews. Rogers allegedly told one witness the robbery took place, but the murder was not supposed to go down, Savoy testified. It was eating him alive, the detective said of Rogers. Criminal Commissioner Patricia Joyce ruled there was probable cause to continue holding Rogers on the murder and robbery charges. She also denied a motion to reduce his $700,000 bail. Loggins returns to court in Tennessee on February 4th, court records set. Next story, 19 dead in domestic violence. 2020 East Baton Rouge victims, highest in decade, by Jacqueline de Rapatis. Staff writer. Domestic violence claimed 19 lives in East Baton Rouge in 2020, the highest number in at least a decade and more than quadrupled the previous year. Advocates and law enforcement officials say the pandemic played a major role. Isolated at home with their abusers, victims struggled to survive in increasingly dangerous and volatile situations where violence became more frequent or escalated more quickly. It's been a bad year, said Mariah Oneski, executive director of the Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. What COVID did is create the perfect environment for domestic violence to flourish. Misdemeanor cases for domestic violence were relatively steady and official support underreported, despite the much higher death toll. It seemed this year that the level of violence committed against women had been much higher, said East Baton Rouge District Attorney Hiller Moore III. That is, the brutality of it has seemed to increase this year. Domestic abuse made up close to half of the Baton Rouge Police Department's major assault cases. The warning started early. Tawana Harris, who led the domestic violence nonprofit, spent much of mid-March fielding calls from victims just trying to survive hour to hour, as public health guidance encouraged people to stay home and avoid potential exposure to the virus. With the threat of a lockdown looming and the countless unknowns of the pandemic ahead, many victims cannot see a path out of their abuser's control as the world closed around them. Harris, herself a survivor of abuse, sounded exhausted and hopeless, as she explained back in March that all she could tell victims was to find a quiet place like a bathroom or closet to escape their abuser for a few minutes. It's so hard finding the words to say to them. I find it to be challenging in a time like this, she said, her voice breaking. just letting them know that we're with them. Baton Rouge officials have seen a similar pattern of relationship and family violence in 2017, following the chaos and traumatic events of the previous year. Large-scale civil unrest after the death of Alton Sterling, a fatal police ambush, and a catastrophic flood had brutalized the city, leaving many without security or stability. That year saw 14 domestic violence homicides, Moore said. Financial strain, cramped living quarters, job uncertainty, limited outreach for victims, and intense emotional fallout strained already abusive relationships until they snapped. When the coronavirus emerged last year, officials feared it would create similar conditions. 9 months later, the finalized numbers confirmed those initial fears. The death toll includes girlfriends like 21-year-old Kennedy Smith, who was stabbed to death by a boyfriend. Others like 40-year-old Brenda Mullins, who was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend after she refused to let him in the house with her 3 children. Law enforcement officials like Lieutenant Glenn Hutto Jr., a Baton Rouge police officer who died at the hands of a man who had just killed his girlfriend's stepfather, and toddlers like 2-year-old Azaria Thomas. As the pandemic dragged on, the stress and uncertainty of a tumultuous year ramped up existing tension. Children were pulled from classrooms to keep them safe, and many primary breadwinners lost jobs, straining relationships already pulled taut. Baton Rouge's family court remained open even during the early lockdown, and applications for temporary restraining orders increased slightly. Officials noted the uptick may have been steeper if victims didn't have to go right back home after filing for the order. Field said these are hard to ignore because someone usually ends up in the hospital. Baton Rouge Police Department's major assaults divisions reported that 309 out of 739 total cases were the result of domestic violence, approximately 42%. Okay, turning to sports, Broadhead lauds Sunbelt's COVID makeup policy. Conference scheduling flexibility will be key for UL women. Marlins men grapple with series splits by Kevin Foote, sports and staff writer for The Advocate. Learning in the ins and outs of COVID-19 college basketball continues for the UL Raging Cajuns. On the men's side, Coach Barb Marlin's Cajuns are trying to figure out how to do anything but split in the series. Like 5 of the 6 teams in the Sun Belt West race, UL, with a 9-4 record and a 3-3 record in the conference, is 500 in conference play heading into Friday's 6 p.m. home game against Arkansas State. Texas State currently leads the pack at 3-1. On the women's side, Coach Gary Broadhead's Cajuns, 2-5 and 1-1 in conference play, are trying to somehow avoid being rusty despite not playing in games since January 2nd. After getting 2 straight league weekends postponed, the UL women will now hit the road to meet the hottest team in the whole conference in Arkansas State. They're 9-1 and 4-0 in conference play. If the Cajuns do get to play at home against Texas State on January 20th, it will be 51 days between home games for UL. I'm extremely worried now, Broadhead said. I wasn't at first. I thought practice looked really good. The more we sit out, the more that I'm worried about us being rusty and not being in the flow of the game like we could. That's why we hang our hat on the defensive side. I don't think we should be that rusty defensively, but on the offensive side, it could be a problem. One thing Broadhead is happy about is how the Sun Belt is handling the makeup policy. He said the league is giving options to the schools. I've got to give a lot of credit to the coaches on the women's side. Broadhead said they were the ones that started bringing it up. The group's concern is playing 6 games in 9 days, and to have 4 games in 5 days is too much for the women. I'm not worried about the knick-knack stuff, Broadhead said. I'm worried about the major injuries. COVID is bad enough, but having an ACL tear or an MCL tear when we try to play too much. I come from the AAU circuit, and we play these kids too much. So I think we're doing the right thing for these student athletes. So unless both schools agree, only one postponed game will be made up. For example, after UL plays Arkansas State on Friday and Saturday, it will travel to Little Rock for a single game on Monday. The Sun Belt confirmed the new policy with this statement. The Sun Belt Conference will reschedule postponed games with the two institutions. One of the two missed games will be mandated to be made up at a date rescheduled by the conference office in consultation with the two institutions. If teams are mutually agreeable to making up the second game, they are permitted to do so. Broadhead says some women's coaches prefer no makeups, but he wasn't aware of any that wanted to make up both games. On the men's side, it fits them a little more to play two if they have to, whereas on the women's side, I think it's a little too much, he said. The conference left it as an option. I think they did the right thing for the kids. And that about wraps up the news and sports for the morning. We'll finally end up with the funerals in the Acadiana area for today. Let's see, Kyle Brown at Walter's Funeral Home at 2 p.m. Joshua Carmichael, Family Life Church, 222 or 2223 Dulles Drive in Lafayette at 10:30 a.m. And Dr. Joseph Roy, Our Lady of Mercy Catholic Church, 445 Marquette Avenue at 10 a.m. Well, folks, that has been the Local News Live for January 19th, 2021. My name is Bruce Cohen. Will always be Bruce Cohen. You can come join us at 9 a.m. Monday through Friday at AOC 1, Cypress Street Radio, our streaming online radio service, or our YouTube station at AOC Community Media. You can read these stories and more at theadvocate.com and find out how to volunteer and more at aocinc.org. That's aocinc.org. Just go to the homepage and look at the volunteer tab, pull it down. You'll see you can fill out a form as a newspaper volunteer reader like myself. We've been doing this from our home studios since the pandemic started. And you can do it in your pajamas if you wish. It's been quite a ride these last 10, 11 months. So just do that if you're interested and come join the volunteer newspaper reading family. As always, I like to end my broadcast by saying stay healthy, stay safe, and stay smart, folks. Please stay smart. Continue wearing your mask when you're around crowds, especially around people you have a quarantine with or don't know. Wash your hands, do all the protocols that are necessary. This thing is still hanging in there, and we've got to stop the spread together. And as always, be kind to each other. Have a great day.